Peaceful protest held in Chemmani seeking justice for mass grave victims. A peaceful protest calling for justice for those buried at the Chemmani Siththuppaththi mass grave was held today, Thursday, 30th July, in the Chemmani area, organized by the Justice and Peace Commission of the Diocese of Jaffna. The protest began in front of the St. Jude Thaddeus statue in Ariyalai under the leadership of Reverend Father Anthonipillai Augustine, Chairman of the Justice and Peace Commission, and proceeded as a peaceful procession to Chemmani Junction. At the conclusion of the procession, Reverend Father Anthonipillai Augustine read an urgent appeal addressed to UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mr. Türk. The appeal noted that 454 sets of human remains, including those of children and infants, had reportedly been recovered from the site as of 21st July 2026. It called for an independent international investigation to establish the truth and ensure accountability. It further called for the excavation, identification, and preservation of human remains to be carried out in accordance with the Minnesota Protocol and other international standards, together with independent DNA analysis, meaningful participation of families, and protection of witnesses and human rights defenders. The appeal also urged UN human rights mechanisms to continue monitoring the Chemmani excavations and called for an UN human rights presence in Jaffna to help ensure the safety of witnesses. More than 100 people, including Diocesan Vicar General Reverend Father Jabaratnam, Reverend Father Paul Jayanthan Pachek, clergy, religious men and women participated in the peaceful protest.
Urgent appeal concerning the Chemmani Siththuppaththi mass grave in Jaffna, Sri Lanka. Dear High Commissioner, we the undersigned priests and religious serving in the Diocese of Jaffna write out profound pastoral concern for the deceased, their families, and all those who continue to search for the relatives who were made to disappear during the Sri Lankan conflict. We gratefully recall your visit to Chemmani mass grave site in 2025. Your presence gave renewed hope to families who have waited many years for truth and justice. Human remains were recovered in Siththuppaththi Cemetery in Chemmani in February 2025. Court-supervised excavation have since uncovered remains on an alarming scale. By 21st July 2026, at least 454 sets of skeletal remains had reportedly been recovered, including those of children and infants. The identities of the deceased, the causes and dates of their deaths, and those responsible have not yet been conclusively established. We do not wish to prejudice the investigation or assign responsibility without reliable evidence. Nevertheless, the scale and circumstances of these burials demand an independent international investigation that is transparent, scientifically credible, and capable of establishing the truth, ensuring accountability. We acknowledge the dedicated work of the Jaffna Magistrate Courts, the Judicial Medical Officer, the Archaeological Team, the University of Jaffna, lawyers and civil society representatives. However, concern raised by the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka and relevant United Nations mechanism regarding the forensic capacity, investigate independence, evidence preservation, victim identification, and the participation and the protection of families must be fully addressed. Relatives of persons subjected to enforced disappearance have repeatedly demanded an independent international investigation, having lost confidence in the domestic mechanism after decades of delay and obstruction of impunity. We fully support and join them in this remand. In our considered view, the scale and context of the Chemmani findings are a clear sign of a wider structural genocide experienced by the Tamil people. This dimension must be examined by competent and independent international mechanism in accordance with the international law. We therefore respectfully appeal to your office to support and facilitate an independent international investigation into the Chemmani Siththuppaththi mass grave with appropriate international forensic expertise, oversight and safeguards for institutional independence. Ensure that the excavation, examination, identification, and preservation of the remains comply with the Minnesota Protocol and other applicable international standards. Support a reliable identification process, including independent DNA analysis, scientific dating, and the voluntary collection of family reference DNA samples with appropriate privacy standards. ensure that investigators have access to all relevant military, police, detention and government records and are available to establish individual and institutional responsibility while respecting due process and the presumption of innocence. Protect and ensure the meaningful participation of families, witnesses, lawyers, journalists, religious leaders, forensic specialists and human rights defenders. Request the OHCHR Sri Lanka Accountability Project to monitor development and preserve relevant evidence within this mandate. We feel that the presence of OHCHR in Jaffna is necessary for the security of witnesses who come forward to identify the remains of persons buried in Chemmani. Recently, the Minister of Justice has stated that no one has claimed that who are buried in Chemmani are their relatives. Main reasons for this silence of the people is fear and mistrust of the Sri Lankan government agencies. We also demand that an agreement should be reached between UN and Sri Lankan government to ensure the security of the witnesses. Every set of remains represent a human person of inviolable dignity and a family living with grief and uncertainty. Our appeal is not motivated by revenge or hostility towards any community or institution. We seek truth established through evidence, justice according to law, dignity for the dead, and genuine reconciliation for all people of Sri Lanka. We respectfully request your urgent intervention and a written response outlining the steps that your office, under the United Nations mechanisms, will take to advance this investigation and protect the rights of families. Yours respectfully, the undersigned priest and religious serving in the Diocese of Jaffna, Sri Lanka.